Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are really glad you could join us today. If you're someone who looks for those rare moments where, music and major historical events collide, today's topic is a phenomenal case study.
Oh, absolutely. It's an incredible story.
Yeah, so our mission for this deep dive is driven by a really comprehensive Wikipedia article. It details the history, the creation, and the legacy of a 1974 Cape Jazz song called Mannenberg.
Composed by the South African musician Abdullah Ibrahim.
Right. And we are going to look at how a nearly 14-minute instrumental jazz track, and keep in mind, recorded in a single improvised take, somehow managed to function as an unofficial national anthem of resistance and hope in apartheid-era South Africa.
What's fascinating here is the paradox right at the center of this story. I mean, we are analyzing a piece of music with absolutely zero lyrics.
Yeah.
None at all. There's no vocalist providing a message, there's no explicit call to action in the text, and crucially, no words for a government censor to point to and ban.
Which is wild when you think about it.
Right. Yet the historical record shows this specific piece of music managed to convey a subversive political message that mobilized a massive demographic. How a purely instrumental piece achieves that level of communication, well, that's exactly what we are going to explore.
To understand the mechanics of that communication, we need to start with the architect of the sound himself, Abdullah Ibrahim.
Yes.
He was born in Cape Town in 1934. The source material notes that before he converted to Islam in 1968, he was actually known professionally as Dollar Brand.
That's right.
And based on the laws of the South African government at the time, his mixed racial heritage placed him into a very, very specific legal category.
And that legal categorization is crucial context for you to understand. Under the Population Registration Act, implemented by the apartheid government, South Africans were strictly classified into racial groups.
Right. This system was incredibly rigid.
Extremely. Ibrahim was officially classified as a colored person. This was a legal designation for people of mixed heritage, and it dictated literally everything, where you were legally allowed to live, work, and travel.
So his whole world was defined by this.
Yes, and that specific heritage, along with the geographic realities of growing up in Cape Town, it completely shaped his musical development.
So how did those geographic realities influence the actual sound he was producing?
Well, his early influences were incredibly diverse. His mother played piano in a church, so he was steeped in the structure and the style of hymnal music from a young age.
Okay, church hymns.
Right. But outside the church, in the really vibrant neighborhoods of Cape Town, he was absorbing totally different local genres. The article specifically points to styles like Marabi and Makonga, and he was hearing those right alongside imported American jazz.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. For those of us who aren't familiar with mid-century South African music, what exactly do those local genres sound like?
Okay, so Marabi started as a keyboard style in the 1920s. It's heavily reliant on repeating highly danceable chord progressions.
Like party music.
Exactly, it was music meant for social gatherings. Then you have Mbakanga, which came a bit later. That style blends those urban jazz structures with more rural, traditional Zulu rhythms.
Ah, I see.
So Ibrahim was essentially taking the harmonic structure of American jazz, mixing it with the solemnity of those church hymns, and adding the rhythmic drive of these local dance styles. He just merged them all together.
And he became really recognized in the jazz circles of Cape Town and Johannesburg for that specific fusion. The article mentions that in 1959 he helped form a group called the Jazz Epistles.
A legendary group.
Yeah, a really notable lineup. It featured musicians like Kippie Moeketsi, Hugh Masekela, Jonas Gwangwa, Johnny Gertza, and Makaya Nchoko. Okay, let's unpack this, because the political climate they were navigating in the late 1950s and early 1960s was, was highly restrictive.
Very much so. The Jazz Epistles, as a collective, intentionally avoided explicit political activity. Their stated focus was purely on playing jazz.
They just wanted to play.
Right. However, the apartheid government maintained a stance of deep suspicion toward jazz groups. They often viewed large, mixed gatherings centered around this music as inherently subversive. And this general suspicion, it escalated into direct state repression following the Sharpeville Massacre in 1960.
Right. And for context for you listening, the Sharpeville Massacre was a tragic event where South African police fired on a crowd of people protesting past laws. The historical record indicates 69 people were killed.
It was a turning point. Following that event, the government declared a state of emergency. That included severe restrictions on public gatherings.
Which means no gigs.
Exactly. The pressure on musicians became immense. The working environment just evaporated. That led to the Jazz Epistles disbanding, and by 1962, Ibrahim, like so many other artists of his generation, went into exile.
The sources track him and his wife, the vocalist Asema B. Benjamin, spending the 60s and 70s living primarily in Europe and the United States.
But it wasn't disconnected from music.
Not at all. He lived in New York City, played with Duke Ellington's band, and even studied composition at the Juilliard School of Music.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that time in the United States really altered his artistic trajectory. I mean, working with someone like Duke Ellington, it exposed him to new ways of structuring a band.
How so?
Specifically, how to allow for individual expression within a larger cohesive unit. Furthermore, the 1960s and 70s in the U.S. saw the rise of the Black Power movement.
Right, a huge cultural shift.
Yeah, and the article notes this ideological shift had a profound impact on Ibrahim and his collaborators. They started to view music through the lens of cultural nationalism.
Meaning what, exactly, in a musical sense?
It meant a conscious, deliberate decision to reclaim their heritage through their instruments. Instead of just playing street American jazz, Ibrahim began intentionally weaving more traditional African elements and local South African rhythms back into his compositions.
He was making a statement.
Exactly, a statement about the validity and the importance of his own culture's sound.
Which sets the perfect stage for 1974. The Wikipedia article notes he made brief trips back to South Africa during his exile. But the situation back home had changed dramatically, particularly regarding a neighborhood called District 6. Why was this specific area so pivotal to the creation of Mannenberg?
District 6 was historically a racially mixed, incredibly vibrant neighborhood in Cape Town. It was known as a massive hub for arts, music, and culture.
A real community center.
Yes. However, under the Group Areas Act, the government declared it a whites-only area. This initiated a brutal process of forced removals. Tens of thousands of residents, primarily those classified as colored, were forcibly evicted. Their homes were literally bulldozed, and they were relocated to barren townships on the outskirts of the city, an area known as the Cape Flats.
The destruction of that cultural hub directly impacted Ibrahim upon his return. So during a visit in the early 1970s, he connected with a producer named Rashid Valley at Valley's record shop in Johannesburg. The shop was called Kohinoor.
Right, and they tried working together.
They did. They produced 2 initial albums together, which were sort of folk-infused jazz records. But according to the data, those first 2 attempts were not financially successful.
The market just didn't respond to them. Consequently, they decided to change their approach. So for their third collaboration in 1974, an album titled Underground in Africa, they pivoted their sound significantly.
They brought in new influences.
They fused their jazz foundation with rock music and South African pop. And to execute this, Ibrahim recruited members of a local band called Aswayati. That brought in 2 prominent saxophonists, Robbie Jansen and Basil Coetzee.
And the financial return on that album was much stronger, which led directly to the legendary June 1974 recording session back in Cape Town. Ibrahim tasked Coetzee with assembling a backing band. That brought Jansen back into the studio alongside several new musicians.
And Valley was producing.
Yep, Valley produced the session on his newly established label, Ash-Shams, which is an Arabic word meaning the sun, a name Ibrahim actually suggested.
They spent days in that Cape Town studio working through pre-composed material. But the track that would define the entire session, it wasn't written down on sheet music.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The recording of Mannenberg happened in just 1 single take.
1 take. Incredible.
The article describes Ibrahim sitting down at the piano and simply starting to improvise a melody. Slowly, he instructed the rest of the band to join in. While he provided some basic melodic direction, the resulting 14-minute track was largely an exercise in collective improvisation.
And that spontaneous creation needed a title. They chose Mannenberg, naming it after the specific township in the Cape Flats where many of the displaced residents from District 6 had been relocated.
So it was a direct reference to the forced removals.
Absolutely. At the time, Basil Coetzee actually lived there. Ibrahim was explicit about the symbolism. He stated that Mannenberg signified the forced removal of people, but more specifically, it represented the displacement of their music and their culture.
It essentially served as a geographic and cultural marker, although the article notes they almost went with a highly specific alternative title, Mrs. Williams from Mannenberg.
Oh, right, the housekeeper.
Yeah, this is a reference to Gladys Williams. She was the former housekeeper of Morris Goldberg, one of the saxophonists on the session. Ibrahim actually took a photograph of her, which they ended up using for the album cover.
Using her image grounded the record in the reality of the people living in those townships. It wasn't abstract. And the album release itself, titled Mannenberg is Where It's Happening, was totally unconventional for the era.
I noticed that when looking at the discography. The physical vinyl release only featured 2 tracks in total. You had Mannenberg taking up one entire side at 13 minutes and 37 seconds.
A massive track.
And a track called The Pilgrim on the other side, clocking in at 12 minutes and 47 seconds.
Releasing an album with only 2 long-form instrumental tracks was a massive commercial risk. I mean, radio play alone would be difficult, but it was the specific sound of Mannenberg that captured the audience. It features this lilting melody over a very gentle, hypnotic groove.
While listening to it, I noticed the piano itself doesn't sound like a standard studio grand piano. It has this almost metallic buzzing quality to it. Did they use a specific type of instrument for the recording?
They used a standard piano, but Ibrahim made a physical modification to it. He actually attached metal thumbtacks to the hammers of the piano inside the casing.
Wait, he put thumbtacks inside the piano?
Yes. So when you press a key, the hammer strikes the string. With the thumbtack attached, it creates this sharp, metallic timbre.
That's fascinating.
And this wasn't just for a cool audio effect. It was a deliberate cultural callback. That specific metallic sound was instantly recognizable to the local audience as the sound of old, heavily used pianos from the traditional Marabi dance halls.
That is a brilliant tactile detail. He literally altered the mechanics of the instrument to force it to sound like his heritage. The Wikipedia article breaks down the resulting track as a highly specific fusion of local styles. It mentions a ticky dry beat and a langarm saxophone melody. How do those elements function within the song?
Well, the fusion is exactly what made it universally appealing across different communities in South Africa. The foundation is that Marabi groove driven by the thumbtack piano. On top of that, you have the rhythm section playing a beat reminiscent of tiki dry.
And tiki dry is a dance style.
Yeah, it was a fast-paced, spinning dance style popular in the Cape. Then you layer on the saxophone playing a sweeping melody associated with long arm.
What does a langarm refer to?
Long arm translates to long arm. It's a type of formal ballroom-style dance deeply rooted in Cape culture. By incorporating the musical phrasing of that dance style and blending it with the jazz aesthetic and the Marabi chords, Ibrahim created a piece of music that drew from the cultural traditions of both the colored and black communities.
We should also definitely highlight the saxophone performance itself. Basil Coetzee's tenor saxophone solo on the track became so culturally significant that he was forever known by the nickname Mannenberg.
It's important to note, though, that the song's heavy reliance on familiar cultural touchstones did lead to some controversy.
Really?
Yes, a musician named Zaxxon Kosi pointed out that Mannenberg shared significant similarities with his own 1960 Mibakonga track called Jackpot, and Kosi believed the melody was lifted.
How did Ibrahim respond to that?
Ibrahim defended his composition, explaining that the piece was meant to be an affirmation that their inherent shared culture was valid. It was communal. As jazz pianist Molalekwa later observed, regardless of its eventual political weight, Mannenberg was fundamentally constructed as a dance song.
And the commercial response totally proved that people recognized it as such. Before the official distribution even began, Rashid Valley tested the track by playing it on loudspeakers outside his Johannesburg record store.
Oh, great marketing tactic.
It worked perfectly. The reaction was immediate. Pedestrians stopped in the street to listen. That resulted in 5,000 copies sold in the first week alone.
And Valley's small independent label just couldn't handle the manufacturing demand. He had to secure a distribution deal with Gallo Records, which was the largest record company in South Africa.
Just to keep up with sales.
Right. And to put the sales figures into historical context, an album selling 20,000 copies at that time was considered a major success. Mannenberg sold 43,000 copies in 7 months. It became the most popular jazz LP in the country's history.
The sales numbers are impressive, but the song's trajectory into political spaces is what makes it so unique. The source material shares a really notable anecdote regarding Nelson Mandela.
This is a powerful story.
At the time, Mandela was imprisoned on Robben Island. This was a maximum security political prison where authorities strictly prohibited access to music. Yet, a lawyer managed to smuggle a copy of the Mannenberg record onto the island, and they somehow managed to play it over the prison's control room loudspeakers.
Ibrahim recounted in an interview that upon hearing the music playing through the prison, Mandela's reaction was to state, "Liberation is near."
Wow.
Yeah.
It is remarkable to consider a piece of instrumental music bypassing prison censors simply because it lacks objectionable lyrics. yet still successfully communicating a message of inevitable freedom to a political prisoner.
Censors look for explicit text to ban. They struggle to identify or articulate why a specific chord progression or a localized dance rhythm is dangerous. But as the 1970s progressed, the historical context shifted, and the song moved from a commercial hit to an overt political anthem. A major turning point was the Soweto Uprising in June 1976.
The historical record details that during the Soweto Uprising, thousands of students protested the government's mandate, introducing Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in local schools. The protests resulted in police firing on the crowds of students.
A horrific escalation.
Following these events, Abdullah Ibrahim and Sathima Bey Benjamin publicly expressed their support for the African National Congress, the ANC, which was a banned political organization at the time.
As resistance against the apartheid government intensified throughout the 1980s, Mannenberg was widely adopted as the unofficial national anthem of South Africa. The musicians who played on the original recording, Robbie Jansen and Basil Coetzee, regularly performed the song at political protests and rallies.
Taking the music directly to the movement.
Exactly. Jansen would often follow the instrumental performance with speeches emphasizing cultural pride and political mobilization. Eventually, members of the resistance movement even began repurposing the instrumental melody, writing and singing their own anti-apartheid lyrics over the familiar tune.
The track's influence eventually expanded well beyond South Africa's borders, too. It saw international distribution. When it was released in the United States, the title was changed to Cape Town Fringe.
It really made its mark globally.
It did. The composition was later included on Darius Brubeck's album African Tributes. And for those interested in the broader intersection of music and political history, the song is also featured heavily in the 2002 documentary film Amandla, A Revolution in Four-Part Harmony.
Assessing the song's long-term legacy, the commentator Lindsey Johns provided a really thoughtful analysis in The Spectator on the 40th anniversary of the album's release. He described the track as thranotic, passionate, and ethereally beautiful.
Thranotic, meaning it functions like a lament or a memorial for the dead.
Precisely. It mourns the loss of District 6. But Johns makes a critical point regarding its dual nature. While the song is intrinsically tied to the specific geographic and political realities of the Cape Flats in the 1970s, it is fundamentally driven by a life-affirming joy.
Joy in the face of oppression.
Yes. He argues that this underlying joy is what allows the music to resonate with marginalized communities globally. It demonstrates how art can be hyper-specific to one historical moment while maintaining universal accessibility.
There is actually a tangible, physical monument to that specific piece of music standing in Cape Town today.
That's right.
Located outside the building that housed the original recording studios, there is an abstract sculpture created by artists Mark O'Donovan and Francois Venter. It consists of 7 stainless steel pipes. Those pipes are mechanically tuned to match the exact frequencies of the first 7 notes of the Mannenberg melody.
Such a cool tribute.
And the installation includes a simple instruction for pedestrians. It just says, run a stick along these pipes to hear Mannenberg.
It operates as an interactive piece of history embedded directly into the urban environment where it was created. I love that.
So what does this all mean? When we review the source material, we find an instrumental track recorded in a single take, utilizing collective improvisation, and played on a piano modified with metal thumbtacks.
A truly unique recipe.
Yet, through its deliberate synthesis of local rhythms and jazz structures, it documented the cultural displacement of a community, circumvented strict government censorship, and served as a rallying cry for a major political movement.
This raises an important question, and it is a concept for you to consider long after this discussion ends. Mannenberg functioned as a massive, mobilizing political tool without its creator ever recording a single word of protest.
Not one word.
If an instrumental jazz composition can threaten an entrenched, powerful political system simply by existing and affirming a community's culture, we must ask ourselves about the media we engage with daily. What underlying political or cultural power exists within the purely instrumental music, the rhythms, or the dances that you consume on a regular basis without a second thought?
That is an excellent framework for analyzing the art we encounter every single day. Thank you so much for joining us as we explored the history and impact of Mannenberg. Keep analyzing the information around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.